in the second part of this series, we are going to have a look at the huge changes associated with capital gains tax and dividends tax, and in particular corporate profits. Now, for years we have had the same comparisons between individual, trust and company tax rates, and we've seen generally that it's been better to have a company than a trust or an individual taxpayer. What they've done this year is phase one is to change over to dividends tax. Now, that was initially predicted at 10%, but it's going to be imposed now from the 1st of April at 15%. And what that's going to do is it's going to increase the tax on the dividend to 9.39 and therefore increase the corporate rate of tax effective on a distributed profit to 37.39% instead of the previous 35.2%. But that's not all by a long way, because then they start fiddling with the capital gains tax rates, and they push up the corporate CGT inclusion rate to 66.7% and the individual inclusion rate to 33.3%. That then gives an effective corporate capital tax rate of 18.67% compared to 13.33% for an individual. But that's not all, because then, of course, the capital profit has to be distributed, thereby incurring a further tax on the dividend of 13.33 and resulting in an effective 68% being distributed to the shareholder and a resultant 32% total all-inclusive tax on a capital gain distributed, compared to 24% previously. The individual will have a 13.33% CGT rate compared to 10% in the past. That's a substantial change on where we were. And even that's not all, because one also has to have a look at trusts, and on trusts that do not distribute their income, that are taxed within the trust, we then get a 66.6% inclusion rate, which will lead to a 26.7% capital gains tax rates for trusts compared to the 20% that they had previously. These are remarkable changes and need to be analyzed in further detail. Of course, there will also be the increased 30,000 Rand annual exemption applied to the individual taxpayer. One has to look at this also in the context of what's going on in the JSE. Zuma will tell you that when he came in, the JSE was in some distress, and that it has recovered quite nicely by now. And certainly when one looks at it, one gets a very interesting story. Over the last 3 years, if one takes after-tax interest in green versus the consumer price index in red, one can see that after-tax interest is lagging behind the inflation rate. There is no alternative but to go forward and look at the equity side of things and to see whether one can get a better rate and a better rate of return. And what one has got to do is actually have a look and say, investing in my own name is maybe not the way to go. Here's a little demonstration which can be downloaded by way of video from www.criticalthought.co.za. In the retirement industry, all the advertising is generally based on lifestyle. Looks almost like a Viagra advert. But actually what they should be saying to you is to say, if you invest in your own name, you are investing in after-tax income. The interest can be taxable at up to 40%. Then there will be dividends tax at up to 15%. CGT of 13.3%, and on death you will have a CGT event and an exposure to estate duty. If, however, you go through a retirement annuity, the benefit of the new flip over to dividends tax is that retirement annuities, pension funds and provident funds will not be subject to dividends tax. So you will get the annual discount on your contributions to a retirement annuity fund. Then the interest income will be exempt, the dividends tax will be exempt, and the CGT will be exempt. And then on death, you will get a CGT exemption and an estate duty exemption. Well, some may say, well, what about the tax on withdrawal? And what the answer to that is, well, if you withdraw an annuity after you've retired, you're probably going to be at the lower end of the tax tables, and that will lead to a lower rate of tax than hopefully the tax benefit that you got on contribution. There are also the tables for the taxation of lump sums. They were not affected in this year's budget, but they can also be of some assistance. Once more, when you are over 65, currently you're exempt from the new dispensation on medical expenditure. You'll only be affected by that in 2014, but you will still get tax relief on your medical expenditure. So income received from retirement annuities, less medical expenses, will in general result in zero or very little taxable income. And no, there's no donations tax implication to this. It's simply good common sense. Here's a little app. We say if your planned retirement age is 65 and you're currently 50, investing 10,000 rands a month, and 75% of it is placed in equities, and that your savings rate does not increase above the inflation rate, and that your interest rate stays the same as the inflation rate, about 6% at the moment, that your equities grow at 3% faster than the inflation rate over a period of time, and that your dividend yield is 3% below the inflation rate, and the inflation rate is 6% with the marginal tax rate of 40%. You will see that there is a staggering difference at the end of the day. The unit trusts would be worth 1.8 million if bought in your own name. However, if bought through a retirement annuity, you'd be looking at 3.1 million, a staggering difference of 1.3 million rand. If you would like to have a look at the video and the little app that we've got for this, you can visit www.criticalthought.co.za. Moving on, transaction taxes. The holy cow of VAT remains. Nobody wants to touch it because of the political issues. Kutsatu say they can't increase it, and they certainly can't afford to decrease it. On top of this, consumer confidence during 2011 took a huge knock. And again, it went down. This was caused for a variety of reasons. But overall, VAT recovered. One of the things that they are concerned about, that is in 2009, 2010, as a result of the global credit crunch, VAT collections dropped. Well, they've recovered, and we were very lucky to only come up 10 billion rand short this year. There are other observations. In the medium-term budget framework speech, Prof Gordhan said, well, household consumption is weak, and the problem is that the debt ratios of the average household in South Africa remains over 75% of GDP, or your service cost at 14% of earnings. The unofficial reason why consumer confidence is in such a mess is that we can't borrow anymore because of the National Credit Act. Fuel prices have gone up 30%, electricity up, rates and taxes up, costs of education up. We can't borrow anymore, we're not being paid anymore, so we haven't got any money to go to the mall. On top of this, one has to look at oil has gone up from 650 rands per barrel on budget day last year to over 900 rand today. And this was sending shivers down my spine before the budget, because there was the potential for a massive increase in the tax on fuel. But they've held off a little bit. They've gone and they've said, right, fuel prices will increase from 2.61 rand for fuel and 2.47 for diesel last year to 2.89 rand for fuel and 2.75 rand for diesel this year. Last year they got 37 billion from it, so now add 28 cents a litre and they'll get 42 billion rand from it this year. That's count yourself lucky. It could have been a huge amount more. When it comes to booze, well, the Minister of Finance has got no time for boozers. Last year, beer went up by 6 cents per can, from to 91.75 cents excluding VAT. This year, it's gone up to 1 rand and 1 cent per beer, sin tax only excluding VAT. That was about a 10% increase. It was far, far worse on distilled spirits. Last year's price, sin tax on a bottle of spirits was 29 rands a bottle. It's been increased to 36 rand a bottle, an increase of 20% or 7 rand per bottle. You are now paying 1 rand 20 sin tax per tot of booze you drink. But that's not all. The cigarette smokers have also got a bit of a problem. Last year they took the bulk of the whack, an increase of 80 cents per pack to R9.74 sin tax per 20. This year they got off a bit lighter at only 58 cents per packet, but the sin tax component is now R10.32 per pack. Add VAT to that on 35 Rand a packet, and you're looking at about a R14.70, call it 15 Rands a packet sin tax component on a packet of cigarettes. Work it out for yourself. Here's another little app. If your planned retirement age is 65 and you smoke 30 a day and you started smoking at 18, and the cost of a packet of cigarettes is 34 Rand, and then you drink 2 cases of beer a week, you started drinking that at 18, and your cost of a 6-pack of beer is about 35 to 40 Rand, and you drink spirits at 30 tots a week, a bottle a week, at 100 Rand a bottle, if you can get booze at that price, and you drink 2 bottles of wine a week at a cost of 40 Rands per bottle. Here's what you've spent. You've already spent, at age 30, in this model, this chap has spent 223,000 Rand on cigarettes, 174,000 on beer, 19,500 on spirits, and 24,000 on wine. Total wasted to date 442,000 Rand, and he's only 30. That would have been a deposit on a house. Then up from age 30 to age 65, the same person will spend 651,000 on cigarettes, 509,000 on beer, 136,000 on spirits, and 109 on wine. Total 1.4 million will be spent and lost between now and retirement. But then the dirty habit will have to continue in retirement, going and saying, I will have to have saved in my retirement to fund my smoking, 465,000, and my drinking, 364,000 for beers, 97,000 for spirits, and 78,000 for wine. Another R1 million in your retirement plan, please, for your dirty habits. Total cost of your dirty habits over a lifetime, 2.854 million Rand. That's absolutely staggering. On residential property, well, the residential property market has still not recovered, and transfer duty receipts have declined to about 60% of what they were in 2007. Last year we saw a substantial reduction in transfer duties in an attempt to stimulate the market. This has remained unchanged this year, and the primary residence allowance has received a little adjustment. So transfer duty unchanged, primary residence allowance increased to 2 million Rand per household. And with the CGT increase, that is most welcome. On estate duty, we get the 2 estates combined nowadays for estate duty purposes. They haven't made any adjustment this year. The review of 2 years ago seems to have produced very little. So you get for estate duty an abatement of 3.5 million for dad, 3.5 million for mom, total 7 million. That will stay unchanged. But CGT on death has gone up a bit. You get a 200,000 Rand allowance for dad and a 200,000 Rand allowance for mom, total 400,000. That's been increased to 300,000 and 300,000, total 600,000, CGT free. Well, there's the budget for you in a nutshell. What does the road ahead show? It shows that we are surviving the credit crunch at this stage. And that is a huge, huge relief. Things could be a lot worse. We have avoided massive increases in personal tax. We have avoided a massive increase in VAT or electricity levy or fuel levy. The price that we've had to pay for it is an increased rate on dividend tax, increased capital gains tax, and if you're a whiskey drinker, well, you have no sympathy from the Minister of Finance. Overall, it's a great budget. That's if you're not somebody who's homeless who's looking for an extra 20 Rands a month. But as far as I'm concerned, I'll take it. I'm Matthew Lester from the Rhodes University Business School. Thank you for your participation in this event.